just kick the program going now. Kira, it's very good to see all of you. We're delighted you could join us this wonderful afternoon to celebrate the work of women in data science. And coincidentally, of course, we had International Women's Day on Tuesday. So this is a fitting tribute to the women who work in the data science field. We have an exciting program planned for you both today and on Thursday. And at the end of today's session, we'll talk to you about what to expect on Thursday. So in terms of how the webinar will run, you have the chat window there that you can use to chat with each other. But what will happen is that the presenters we've asked them to talk for about 20 minutes. And after that, we'll allow about 5 minutes for questions. So while the presenter is talking, if you have a question, please post it on the Q&A window. And once the presenter has finished talking, we'll just look at a few questions, depending on how much time there is. We'll pick a few questions that I'll read out to the presenter, and then they can, then they'll be able to respond to your question. So all attendees are muted, just so that we can keep an eye on time, and so you won't be able to communicate verbally with us. So communication really with the team, if you want your questions answered, is via the Q&A window. Okay, so I'll now move on to the next slide, which will tell you about our program for today. Or rather, well, first of all, we'll talk about the sponsors. So this session, these 2 event days are sponsored by a number of organizations, and we're very grateful for them. So our gold sponsor for this year is Stats New Zealand, and we've got presenters from Stats New Zealand who will talk about the work they do in the data science field. And the School of Mathematics and Statistics, which I'm part of, from Victoria University of Wellington, is hosting this event. And we're grateful for making this possible. And then we have a number of other sponsors, Martin Jenkins, Dragonfly, and Dot Loves Data, and they will have speakers as part of these 2 events, 2 days, to tell us about the work that they do. And finally, we have a partner association, New Zealand Statistical Association, that is supporting this event as well. And the New Zealand Stats, the NZSA members will have received an invitation to this event as well. So that's those are our support organizations, and we're very grateful for their support as well. So let's look at what we have for you today in terms of the program. So this event is about women in data science, and the idea is to encourage women to take up data science. And so the purpose of this event is to showcase the work of women in data science. But I also believe that diversity in data science is important, and not just in terms of having more women, but also having different people working in that field. And that could be different people in terms of their ethnicity, in terms of their training, because the way you approach a problem, the lens with which you approach a problem really will differ depending on your background. And so having a diverse group of people working in the field, I think, really enriches it. And you'll see that reflected in the talks that we'll have. So we'll look at we will have a talk from Alice about Stats New Zealand. We'll talk about data ventures and innovation. And later in the talk, we'll have, in the evening, we'll have a talk from Kirikowhai Mikaere, who will talk about Maori data sovereignty, and the work that she does with iwi in the data space. And we have an exciting panel discussion planned for later on. This will be facilitated by Kate, and that will be talking about tackling climate change with data. So that's just an overall overview of the session of the program you have today. So the program is up on the website. You feel free to look at that during the course of the evening if you want to know what's up next. So next, I will then talk a bit about the WIDS team. So this WIDS event for 2022 for New Zealand. It's organized mainly by Kate, Kolich, and myself. We are the ambassadors for WIDS in New Zealand. So Kate is the Assistant Governor as well as General Manager for Information Data and Analytics at Reserve Bank of New Zealand. And I'm a Senior Lecturer in Statistics as well as being the Associate Dean for Postgraduate Research at the Faculty of Engineering at Victoria University. And together with me, we have 3 other members of the team who are going to help us with selection of scholarship winners. And we'll talk about scholarships at the next event next week. And behind the scenes, we're very grateful to have Amy Galpa, who's helping us with the panelists and making sure we all, sort of when we have problems with technology, she'll be able to help us out. So we're very grateful to all of those. Okay, I will now hand over to Kate.
Kia ora. Thank you so much, Nokuthaba. It's been a real pleasure to work with you this year. And I'm so delighted to be bringing Women in Data Science to New Zealand again for the 5th year. And it for me has been a really long journey of trying to bring the opportunity for more women to amplify their voices and share their stories about their experiences working in the fields of data science. But we're not alone. Actually, we're part of a global community. The global community started at Stanford University, and they now have 200 events. So this is a licensed event that is an independent event run through the New Zealand team here. But you can see all those pins around the world are just a few of the events that are happening globally. And just this last International Women's Day, there was a event held at Stanford University, which was the main home of Women in Data Science. So I'll go to the next slide. And in 2019, I actually was there at Stanford with Professor Margot Gerritsen, who's there in that tweet there. That was before the world changed. At that time, we were actually having really good conversations about the great event that we were going to have in New Zealand at the time in 2020 with Professor Rosalind Archer, who also used to organise WIDS events with me. And obviously everything changed, and since then we've been online. But Margot is a really interesting person. She founded Women in Data Science about 6 years ago. And what's really interesting about her is that she started her academic career in New Zealand. And the fact that she started her academic career in New Zealand at University of Auckland, that was actually the gateway into how I actually got involved in Women in Data Science, was because I met her on one of my trips to that I was doing some research in Silicon Valley at the time as part of my job, and found out that one of the people she used to study with was the Dean of Engineering at University of Auckland, Rosalind Archer, who helped organise the very first Women in Data Science event that we had in New Zealand. So I'll go to the next slide. And this is a bit of a timeline of that. So in 2018, we had our very first Women in Data Science event at the University of Auckland. You can see there, we were able to meet in person. That lovely wall of WIDS logos there, that was Ernestine Walsh and I. We actually put those all up on the wall about half an hour before the event. What was really unique about there, and you can see Rosalind in the photo, this is just a little bit about the kaupapa of WIDS in New Zealand, is that she was delighted to come on board because she had studied with Margot, and the fact that when Margot left University of Auckland, that created the vacancy for Rosalind to have her first academic career. So it really speaks to the heart of what we're trying to do. This is all about women uplifting women and helping them progress in their careers in the field of data science. And so yeah, really delighted about that. In 2019, we were back here at Victoria University. That's with Mary Ellen Gordon, who helped organise. We were able to have an in-person event with about 360 attendees at the Pupitea campus. And then obviously since then, 2020 and 2021, it's all been online. And this year, online again, but very delighted to be back at Victoria University, since that's where I did both my degrees. So I'm very pleased to be partnered up with Nokuthaba to deliver Women in Data Science in New Zealand. So we'll go to the next slide. And between 2018 and 2022, these are some of the amazing women, and this is pretty much all the amazing women that have actually spoken at WIDS or about to speak at WIDS New Zealand events through our 2022 event. And I'm sure you can see some familiar faces. New Zealand's really small, and I'm pretty sure that many of our participants here today may know of or have worked with some of these women. It's all about making connections, helping a number of women to share their stories and inspire the next generation and keep the current generation inspired to keep doing great work. So we'll go to the next slide. All right. So while you're here today, please don't forget to share your experience. We're on LinkedIn. We're also on Twitter. Please follow us on LinkedIn, follow us on Twitter, use the hashtag WIDSNZ2022 and post your thoughts. If someone says something particularly inspiring, go ahead and share it. Take a screen grab, share those online. Make sure that you just spread the word and inspire people to come along next week. But before we get going into the main part of the talks, we've actually got a presentation from the global WIDS community. And so I'll ask Emmy to share that video now. There's no sound.
Is at the heart of so much in the world right now. We're making decisions not just for us now, but for future generations as well.
The connection to data science is becoming more and more important to the work. The work has been going on for the last 25 years.
So what really drives us at WIDS is that we want diversity at the decision table here. And women absolutely need to be there.
To me, a healthy data science community is one that embraces diversity.
We started WIDS with a conference at Stanford University in 2015 with three main goals that haven't really changed. First, to inspire women to join or stay in the field of data science. Second, to educate everyone by highlighting fantastic women and their technical work. And third, to support women around the world.
And wow, did we hit a nerve we didn't even know existed. Fast forward to 2022, and we have 200 regional events worldwide in more than 60 countries. And it just keeps growing year after year.
Last year, we were with all of you virtually. We had a 24-hour around the world event, which was very exciting. And so despite the pandemic, we got together and we created this global community. We had speakers from over 25 different countries, and it was wonderful.
And one silver lining in an otherwise tough year in 2021 is that attendees to WIDS regional events could be from anywhere in the world. We also saw really interesting collaborations, WIDS ambassadors coming together to host events in Africa, Saudi Arabia, Colombia, and Central and Eastern Europe.
One of the things I really love about WIDS is hosting the WIDS podcast. We now have listeners from over 160 countries, which is just incredible, and many different guests. And I'm also really excited to announce that we'll soon have a co-host of the WIDS podcast, Cindy Arosco.
We also had amazing participation in the WIDS Datathon this year. Over 4,000 registrants in the Datathon from over 90 countries participating in a challenge related to climate change. And a big shout out to all the WIDS ambassadors who held workshops. We had over 40 workshops across the world.
I hope we also lift our heads above the horizon and think more than just about this moment in time, and think about the goals that we have for our young women and our young girls who'll be leading the next generation.
With the WIDS Education Outreach Program, which is focused on secondary schools, we've delivered materials to collaborators in over 50 countries around the world. We've had a great year despite all the challenges in the schools with COVID. We've had pilots everywhere from Covada, India, to New Haven, Connecticut, to a refugee camp in Jordan and beyond.
New last year were the WIDS workshops, where instructors provided dozens of workshops that were attended by thousands of attendees worldwide, online.
These WIDS initiatives would not be possible without the generous support from our sponsors, the global visionaries, the innovation leaders, and everyone at Stanford.
One thing we've been very excited about this last year is working on what we call the WIDS Academy. We got interested in understanding better what the barriers were for young women and for minorities to enter this exciting field, and how we could possibly remove those barriers. What sort of programs could we put in place with partners all over the world to help?
Our ultimate aim with WIDS is to increase the percentage of women in data science, to achieve at least 30% women across all domains and at all levels, from students to senior leaders, by the year 2030. And we call this 30 by 30. We believe 30% is a tipping point. That's when women truly believe that they are part of a group and they can contribute and have great impact. And we hope that you join us all in reaching this big goal.
For now, though, whether you're at Stanford or at one of the regional events worldwide, or just in your living room, you are a part of the WIDS worldwide movement.
Welcome to WIDS!
Thank you. Yeah, so that's Women in Data Science, the global team, and I'm sure you saw some cameos of some New Zealanders in that sequence there. You would have seen the quick appearance there of Professor Rosalind Archer. She facilitated one of the sessions at the 24-hour Women in Data Science event that was on last year. Professor Tahu Kukutai was on there as well. She has a wonderful podcast with Professor Margot Gerritsen. It's available on the WIDS podcast to listen to. And also there, our Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, she delivered a wonderful talk at last year's event as well. So I'm just really delighted to be part of this. It's great to be part of the global group. This year, I'm also part of the WIDS Ambassador Global Advisory Council, which basically it means that there's a few select of us that have been doing this for a number of years. We try and find great speakers to showcase women from our part of our region. And so that's really what that means to me, is trying to amplify those voices, not only here in New Zealand, but globally. So now I will hand over to my wonderful colleague, Nokuthaba Sibanda, who is my co-ambassador, to lead off for the rest of the evening. Thank you.
Okay, so we're now ready to get on with the program for this evening, and I'll start by introducing our first speaker. Our first speaker is Alice, who is who leads the Data Ventures unit at Stats New Zealand. Her role varies from strategic relationships to operational excellence, and that makes it easier for more New Zealanders to access and gain insights from data. Over to you, Alice.
Thank you very much. Let me share my screen. Is that visible to everyone? Not yet. One moment. Great. Thank you very much for the warm welcome. Kia ora everyone, I'm Alice Qiao. I'm from Data Ventures at Stats New Zealand. It's a great honour to be part of today's event and to be able to share the innovation journey Data Ventures has been on over the past 4 years. Today, I want to talk to you about data innovation in government. I've served in the public service for more than 10 years. I see a lot of dedication. I see a lot of intelligent people like yourselves, see a lot of data, and I'd love to see more data innovation and using data innovation to drive better outcomes for New Zealand. By the end of the talk today, I hope to achieve 2 goals. The first is through our story. I hope I can inspire all of you to champion and innovate in your own careers. It's really hard work. I'm not going to lie about that, but there's a lot of support around us and it's really satisfying when you get it right. So I hope you can pick up at least one useful tip from our story and use it in your own journeys with innovation. So what is Data Ventures? Data Ventures was set up around 4 years ago as the commercial unit of Stats New Zealand. Our main goal was to generate an additional revenue stream for Stats NZ and take on data innovation work that would not have been possible otherwise. More recently, though, we have been working as a full service data consultancy, specialising in data projects involving brokering people and data from the public and private sectors. We're set up as an independent business unit. So we're part of Stats NZ, but we operate with the speed of a commercial enterprise. And this disruptive model really gives us the best of both worlds, the trust of a government agency and the agility of a commercial enterprise to innovate. So in Data Ventures, we have our own branding and culture. We have separate infrastructure to the rest of Stats NZ. We are not responsible for any BAU work. And we also have the mandate to challenge policies and processes when it's appropriate. And in practice, this means we're able to get the right tools for the job without waiting for the rest of the organisation to be ready. And an example of this is using AWS and really simple tools like Slack that we use to collaborate with the team. And this creates a creative environment for us to test a lot of our proof of concepts really quickly and on a small scale, and also for us to fail quickly and learn from that. We work with internal and external customers, and people choose us for 2 key reasons. The first is trust. So being part of Stats NZ means we have robust processes for our methodologies and that we use best practice for really important things like privacy and security and data governance. And being part of the public service also means that our work is fully OIA-able. And with this in mind, our customers have full confidence in the quality of the work we produce. The area we specialise in is data sourcing or data brokering. This may not be a familiar concept to some of you, or the term itself may not be. And the easiest way to think about what we do is thinking about how insurance brokers work. The brokers work directly with the customer and find out about their insurance needs. So it might be your needs for your house, your car, your health. And it's up to the brokers to work with various insurance companies to find out what the right policy is for your situation and negotiate the terms on your behalf. And this is the work that we do for our customers with their data needs. So once all the hard work has been done, it's all packaged up for the rest, for the customer to consume, to have a peace of mind. And that's the exact work that we do for our customers at Data Ventures with their data needs. So let me show you some of the examples of work we've done in the past to give you a sense of the sort of work that I've just talked about. This is our very first product that we launched, and it's called the population density model. It captures the number of people who work, live, and play in a given area every hour of the day. We partnered and brokered data from major telco companies to source cell phone tower location data and combined this data with Stats New Zealand's population data expertise to develop this near real-time population estimate model. And it gives insight into population numbers by suburb by hour. This product has been really useful across a large number of use cases. During COVID response, for example, it was used to inform alert level strategies and pandemic modelling. In the economic recovery, not long after that, in the tourism industry, it was used to provide insights into domestic tourist numbers. And let me show you some more detail of what we've done. So this is the COVID-19 response example where we used our product to produce near real-time population insights, and we produced weekly reports that we published online that made it possible for us to look at the population mobility across New Zealand, both during 2020 and 2021. We segmented the data into international and domestic visitors and local residents. And the graph in front of you here shows the sharp decline of international tourists in New Zealand following border closure on the 19th of March. Some of you might remember the international tourists being stranded in New Zealand. So that's why there's a tail there. And we also use this data to look at the impact of COVID-19 on CBD populations throughout New Zealand. We compared population mobility of a week in 2020 to a normal week in 2019. And this gave us a snapshot of how many people were coming and going in the CBDs compared to before COVID. The high frequency data was also used to produce monthly tourism insight reports. And this gave tourism stakeholders insights into changes in their industry with really timely data. With the closure of international borders and the international tourism industry virtually shutting down overnight, Tourism New Zealand were really committed to supporting the regional tourism organisations and using data to better understand the domestic visitor market. And in response to this, we worked with Tourism New Zealand to develop an easy to use interactive insights tool that you see in front of you for tourism stakeholders to easily engage with the data through this near real-time dashboard. And the last example here is the fun piece we did looking at when it would be cheaper to move to Mars than buying a house in New Zealand. For those of you who are keen on a little bit more detail, this is the data model we used for the creation of the population density product. We worked with the telcos to define the data we needed for our product. And this involved establishing relationships with key contacts there, setting up appropriate data supply agreements, creating standard data definitions and business rules. And then we asked each one of the telcos to then aggregate their own data in their own environment so it could be sent to us, anonymized and pre-aggregated. And this has been happening on a daily basis. And we get the data from all the telcos in our own environment, and we combine that with our own expertise to refine the model that we see today. So like I mentioned in the beginning, data innovation is really hard work. It does not happen without many, many challenges along the way. And today I want to share some of those challenges we've experienced in our own journey. The first one I can think of is the constant juggle of competing expectations from different groups. So we had expectations from our customers, from our data providers, from our shareholders, Stats New Zealand, and we were also constantly thinking about the value back to the public sector data system and also the public good element as well. Another challenge was demonstrating commercial success versus value. So a lot of work was done to keep our shareholders confident in investing in us throughout the development of our products. And our advice is keeping your shareholders informed and engaged. And if it's at all possible, it's really useful to show value incrementally throughout your development lifecycle. The biggest challenge by far is, for our population density product at least, was definitely the sourcing of data itself. So our data model was a very new concept. Our own operating model was also a new concept. Private organisations weren't used to working with government the way we did. And frankly, it wasn't their core business to work with us. So the key takeaway from here for you, I think, is really identifying what the mutual value is, build really strong relationships with key contacts, and also make their interactions and work with you as easy as possible for them, not for you, but for them. The next point is pretty much self-explanatory. When you work with multiple large organisations, it's very time-consuming to align everyone's availability and getting your work on their work programs. As an example, one of the large organisations we worked with, we've been working with them for over a year now, and we are about a week away from signing an overarching legal agreement that allows us to work together. So it takes a lot of time to develop those relationships. And once you're able to get it on their work programs, it then takes a lot of effort to go through all the internal processes that can set you up to collaborate with them really easily in the future. And the last challenge that I want to talk about is following best practice. So for many data scientists, following best practice for policy, security, data governance, etc., may seem like a blocker slowing you down. But I want to share that from our experience, I can say that because we followed best practice, it not only helped us to build trust, but it also saved us time later down the track. So ahead of launching our population density product, we spent a good amount of time developing the privacy impact assessment as an example. We got it reviewed externally, and we also got it reviewed with the Office of the Privacy Commissioner. It was then published so anyone who had concerns about our work could trust that we were treating the data responsibly. This seemed like a lot of time investment at the time, but it really helped us when we received media interest and multiple OIAs. And because we followed best practice, because we were prepared, we were able to defend our work and use the data across many more use cases. I compiled a list of tips that helped us, and I hope these will be useful for you as well. So for us, we were very fortunate to have strong support from the senior leadership team at StatsNZ. We report to an independent board chaired by our Stats CE. And on the board, we also have two other deputy chief executives from Stats New Zealand. It's not that fun writing board papers every month, but I have to say that it has been extremely helpful to escalate issues and to get their support and to resolve things really quickly. We have really great team culture. We have a flat structure. We encourage entrepreneurial thinking, and some would describe what we have as a startup culture. And we really have a culture where everyone's opinion matters. And this is when the diversity of our team means we're able to engage with different demographics really well. And example of that is the younger members of the team, for example, have been very active on social media, and that was one way of reaching our audience. And others from the team have got a stronger commercial background, and it's meant that we were able to engage with the public sector more effectively, understanding where they're coming from, some of the challenges they're facing, talking in their language. And others offer a lot of public sector experience and connections. So this has also been really helpful when we work with public sector clients, understanding what their processes are, what their expectations are, and generally how they work. So innovation happens everywhere in organisations, and it's the same at Stats NZ. Data Ventures, we're just really fortunate to have innovation as one of our deliverables or objectives. It is our job to innovate. It is also our job to test new tools and ways of working. But we must be really grateful to our Stats NZ colleagues who have taken on the BAU pressures to give us space to do our work. And we understand this is a very privileged situation to be in. But if it's at all possible for you, then we would recommend ring fencing innovation so you don't have to worry about the BAU pressures and the competing priorities that come with that. Another useful thing we found is embedding commercial and project management disciplines. So we use legal agreements, commercial contracts, and even timesheets. These are all actually really helpful. So on the surface, it may seem like a lot of paperwork, but it is these disciplines that have really challenged us to be very clear about our purpose, our project purpose, the scope, the deliverables, and who is responsible for doing what. And having a commercial imperative has also been a really good test for value. So people often take granted what they get for free, but when they are paying and need to convince various budget holders to put their money on the project, this is when you get the real test and real answer for how valuable your project is to your customers. Another tip we thought about is demonstrating alignment with the strategic direction of the organisation you're working with, whether it's an internal project or an external project. This is really important because it means that when there are competing priorities or a change in leadership, your project can remain well supported. And it also means that the value you deliver through your projects can be widely used, well communicated and appreciated. If you're going to remember one thing from my presentation today, I hope it's this one. Invest in building and maintaining strong internal and external relationships. Identify and deliver value tailored to your customers, data suppliers, or stakeholders. To find out what they might value, you really need to research what's happening in their industry and in their organisation before talking to them. Find out what their biggest headaches are. Is there anything you can do to help them solve a small part of their problem? Is there anyone you can connect them with who might be able to help? You almost have to treat it like a job interview. You make a much better impression if you show that you've done some homework. You then build relationships at multiple levels of the organisation. You want to find out who the decision maker is and who will be the one on the ground helping you with the work. The decision makers are often busy, so it really helps to know and get on the good side of someone who's really close to them and who can influence their decision making. This is also a risk mitigation strategy for when one of your contacts move into another job, you have the remaining contacts to keep progressing your project. So I just want to repeat, if you're only going to remember one thing from this session, remember to invest time in getting to know the people who are critical to your innovation project. And one last tip is not underestimating the power of sales and marketing. So data science is definitely very, very important, and it's close to all of our hearts here today, but so is sales and marketing. There is so much work that happens before the data science work starts. You've got to make sure your pitch is tailored to your audience. You've got to make sure that you can convince your shareholder or manager to invest in your idea. You've also got to convince other organisations to provide you with the data and the support you need. And the simplest way to think about this in my mind is treat everyone like a customer. Treat every interaction like a sales meeting. Do your research, think about your pitch from their perspectives, be prepared, and be genuine. We were only able to get to where we are today with significant and trusting support and investment from Stats NZ. So thank you to my employer. There is also plenty of other support out there that I encourage you to think about in your own innovation journeys. Most of our work is open source, for example, so we're very thankful for the support we've received from the wider open source community. DIA and Westpac both have innovation funds set aside each year for funding innovative data and digital projects. We have definitely benefited from them both, and I also encourage you to look into these for your own projects. This brings me to the end of my talk. I hope you've learned something new and you're able to take away at least one useful tip for yourself. And to finish, how are you thinking about innovation? I'd love to hear about your stories. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much for that talk, Alice. It's really great to hear about the work that Data Ventures is doing. I'll just read off, we have a time for perhaps just one question. People have been posting questions, I'll read the one that has the most votes. So this is a question from Louise, and she asks, what benefits do the telecoms providers get in return for providing the data to you for you to do the work?
Sure. So I'll answer this question in very broad terms. So not specifically to telco providers, but to data providers in general. So we have a couple of models that we use. Procuring data with a commercial contract is one of them. Value exchange is another. So identifying areas where we could help them and they could help us in exchange for their data is another approach. And depending on your project, you may be able to leverage legislation. So this is something that we try to stay away from, definitely for the work that we do in Data Ventures. But in very broad terms, if you are looking for data from a private provider, and if you are working as part of a government agency, there may be existing legislation you may be able to leverage. But my strong advice is that that should be the very, very last resort. And all of this depends on really good relationships. So even if you can use legislation, it's also really important to have strong relationships and having the right people to talk to. So as an example, the decision or the contact that you may have may be very willing to work with you, but they also have to convince their bosses, their colleagues to spend time on your project. So it really helps when you can get the inside word on, okay, if you offer us this help, it would really help me convince my seniors to get this on our work program, or please use legislation on us so I can say this is a compliance exercise, or just figuring out what their biggest challenges are. So it takes a lot of investment in talking to them and understanding what's important to them. And for us, the value exchange model has worked extremely well.
Okay. Thanks very much for that very comprehensive answer, Alice. In the interest of time, we'll move on, but there are quite a number of questions that people have raised in the QA window. So if you have time, maybe you might be able to type out some answers to them. And for everyone else, if you still have questions for Alice, please put them up on the Q&A window. But for now, we'll move on to the next talk. Thanks very much for your input, Alice. We really appreciate your time on this.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Yeah. Okay, so now we're moving on to hearing from Kat Large. So Kath, I've known for some time while she studied here at Victoria, and it's been quite great to see her career in data science develop. So Kath currently works at Dragonfly Data Science as a research scientist, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what she has to say today. So over to you, Kath.
Hello, can you hear me okay, Christina? Is that all working?
It's working, but maybe, I don't know if you could be louder.
Right, yeah. Just a moment. No, it doesn't appear that I...
Yes, it's resumed now.
I got some slides to share.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Can you see my slides in full screen?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone, and thanks, Nokuthaba and the team for the invitation. So I'm Bing. So today I want to talk about mainly the data science and AI at Victoria University of Wellington, and regarding the work, the team, the work we do, and also the program we offer, and our visions, what we do in the future as well. So here's the team. Here's the team at Victoria University of Wellington. So in staff member, we have over 20. So I have 24 currently on the slides, and we have 80 female women in this group, which is not too bad compared with many other, computer science or data science areas. And we also have some postdocs, and we are currently still recruiting postdocs. And we also have other people who are working on related domains that are big data, AI, data science, machine learning. And also we have a large number of PhD students and other PhD or master students in this area. So based on some statistics, we said we have the largest data science and AI team in New Zealand. And we also have the largest research group in evolutionary learning in the Southern Hemisphere. And in terms of what we do, the research areas or the projects, the programs we have, so it covers pretty much all the major data science and AI areas, like images, natural language processing, or this is social network modeling, and also something like skin cancer image classification or in skin cancer detection via computer visions. Something related to some specific research project we're doing related to New Zealand. So for example, one of our data science colleagues, working on the project that you put sensors in the bush and you detect via the sensor, you're using some data science and machine learning technique to detect the species of the birds. And for example, you also can looking at the population of a kiwi and their size. And also looking at, in the agriculture domain, we're looking at how the climate change impacts fish traveling, and also how we're going to estimate fish weight from images, and how we're going to detect buoy from the mussel farm images. So this work, we collaborate that with Dana, who is the next speaker from Cawthron. Regarding our programs, and we have data science programs. We also have AI machine learning programs. So data science programs that's mainly in the School of Mathematics and Statistics. And if you want to know more, you can contact Richard here. So they have BSc in data science, and that is 3-year programs. So from the label, data means the paper name is data, and comp for computer science, and stat means statistics, of course. So it's a 3-year program combining with some statistics and data course and computer science courses. Of course, I won't be able to have all the details presented here. So some roughly what's the courses here we offer in data science in order to complete the degree, and some highlights on the programming or skills you can see, including like Python, R, SQL. That is quite common and very widely used in industry or almost everywhere when you're working on data science. So those are the undergraduate programs, and of course, the undergraduate program also allow you to do a major in data science. Also, you can do some minor together with other major degrees. After the undergrad, there will be postgraduate programs we offer. So ranging from 60 points programs on postgraduate certificate in science, in data science, to this 360 points of a PhD. So it depends on different preference of the student or different background, or some of the, for example, that Nokuthaba said, we have families, some how to do full-time. I see many people doing part-time. And some highlight is the Master of Data Science program, which is a very popular program. And it also has the flexibility of, depends on the background the student have. It could be 180 points or could be 240 points running for courses. And it's normally running for, can be finished in 12 months from the first trimester starting from March until next year, February, 3 trimesters. And it has workplace, in work placement, and also have a research project. It's probably it's a very popular programs in data science. And we also have AI programs. AI program, we are a little bit behind the data science program development. So if you want to know more, you can find from this link, you can email me. So what we have currently, we do not have an undergraduate major in AI yet. So currently have is the postgraduate programs in artificial intelligence. So we're following very similar to the data science postgraduate programs. So that starts from the 60 points of a postgraduate certificate in science in AI to this 360 points. That means 3 to 4 years of PhD. Among all these programs, it's a very popular one is the Master of AI. Master of AI is you can finish it within 1 year, start from March until next year, February, or depends on the background or student starting time. You could take to 16 months to complete. And I have seen many students actually who are working full-time. They are either doing part-time or Master of AI, or they start from the very same, short-term, the 60 points of postgrad certificate in AI. So they do many people working in full-time industry, they took this in part-time. And those are quite flexible programs, and including both data science programs and AI programs. We count the background of the student undergrad degree, and we're also looking at the working experience. So the best way is you talk to one of the student advisors or talk to us. Based on your background, we can recommend courses and the most appropriate degree for you. And the data science and the AI courses, as said, we are developing the undergraduate AI majors. We currently have only 2 undergraduate courses. One's the artificial intelligence introduction and also the machine learning tools and techniques. But we cover almost all the important topics in AI in our current postgraduate courses labeled as AIML, stand for artificial intelligence and machine learning. And we also share the courses between data science and AI. For example, the come through 9 machine learning tools and techniques are shared in both degree. And because we also in the same, we collaborate very closely. And when we're developing both of these data science and AI programs. Yeah, and we are developing undergraduate AI major, and hope that will hopefully start, if everything goes well, we probably start from next year and in 2023. So those are the programs, and some just a little bit of what our students previous working on, working in and now, and what our industry connections. And as you can see, we have connections or have enemies working on data or on in stats and agency, and also in other government agencies, in research institutes like NIWA, and also they are working in big giant tech companies like Amazon, Google, or Microsoft, IBM. So our previous student has been really having really good jobs, and we found it even harder for them to keep them study postgraduate, study PhD, or working with us academic. So they can easily find a job with very good pay. So that's our programs and our vision at Victoria University of Wellington. And our vision is to achieve excellent research and innovation for sustainable data science and AI. Achieve that by doing advanced fundamental research. We want to have international leadership on several areas. and also with the key applications to in New Zealand and in general industry, and also to learn leading knowledge advancement in a significant impact on economic, social, environmental, and health outcomes. And based on the vision we are currently we are establishing. So it has been, we are establishing the VUW Center for Data Science and AI. And we all part of that in the future. So just a bit of the vision we're talking about. So this is what we have based on, or we identify technical themes, that's including this modeling of statistical learning to deep learning, evolutionary learning, and interpretable AI stuff and image computer vision stuff. And based on that, we have key applications on the primary industries and climate change or other important areas currently have. And of course, we sent to IP commercialization, Mali and Pacific Division Mataranga, and also other areas. So that is all from me, and thank you very much. I'll be happy to answer questions if there are any.
Okay, there is a question that has just come through. Thank you, Bing, for that talk about our programs at Victoria. There's a question from Marta, which is, are the postgraduate diploma courses in data science or artificial intelligence available via distance learning? So for people who are in New Zealand, but not in Wellington.
At the moment, we provide dual delivery. So I think for data science from Nokuthaba, you probably know better. For AI postgraduate courses, yes, we offer online, and our school, and we have recently discussed that in the future we will after the pandemic, we will probably keep a theme for online, for remote delivery of all the Master of AI or AI postgraduate courses. But I'm not sure of data science. At the moment, we all do delivery, right? But yeah. I'm not sure after the pandemic, what is the plan? You probably know better, Nokuthaba.
Yeah, for data science, we haven't discussed about doing anything officially in distance mode, but yes, Bing is right. We do offer our courses in dual mode, which means there are currently people who are not in Wellington, but are studying with us. And that has started due to the lockdowns that we had. So definitely, if you're interested, I think have a discussion with either Bing or myself, or for data science, reach out to Richard Arnold, who is the program director, and can discuss options. Okay. Thank you, Bing, and thank you. And I'll say Kath is now back. I'll again reiterate my thanks for her talk. I think people found that quite engaging, and thanks to Bing as well for her presentation. So we'll now move on to, actually before we do that, I'll just maybe pause for maybe a couple of minutes and let everyone just maybe grab a drink or something, and then we'll come back in about 2 minutes just to restart with Dana's talk. Yeah. While we wait to restart, Bing, there's a question for you, which is about scholarships available for the Master of AI.
For Master of AI, we didn't have a particular scholarship on that, but depends on what project you're working on. There is a possibility to have scholarship, and I think we have special scholarship, not from university, more from the research fundings. For example, if someone working on the large research project we have on data science, we both on that. So if you're working on data on the agriculture project, there is a chance for scholarship, but not from the university level. From the funding point of view, there could be other chances as well.
All right, thanks for that. So let's move on with the program. There are no more questions. So we'll move on to a talk from Dana about finding our way in a sea of data.
Thank you, Nokuthaba. Can everyone see me okay? Yeah.
Yeah, we can. So before you start your talk, I'll just introduce you briefly. So Dana is a senior data scientist at Cawthron Institute, where she takes a computational approach to advance our understanding of complex processes in the natural environment. And I think she focuses mainly in the ocean. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Over to you, Dana.
All right. Thank you, Nokuthaba. Kia ora, everyone. My name is Dana Briscoe, and I am a senior data scientist at Cawthron, based in sunny Nelson on the South Island. And it's an absolute pleasure to be invited to give this talk for the Women in Data Science New Zealand 2022 conference. Women in Data Science and the WIDS community has played a pivotal role in my career as a data scientist to date. So I want to say a special thank you to WIDS and the WIDS community, a shout out to Kath Large, and a special thank you to Nokuthaba and Kate for this wonderful opportunity and for organizing a great event for all of us. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and share my screen. Let's see. Hopefully everybody can see that okay. All right, so today I'm going to talk to you about finding our way in a sea of data. And I'm going to break this talk into two different segments. The first will be an introduction, a little bit of background about me. You can probably tell that I'm not from New Zealand originally. I'm from the United States. So I'll walk you through a little bit of the work that I did previously that actually got me into the field of data science. And then I'll spend the second half showing you about some of the really interesting work that I'm currently doing. And that involves collaborating with some of the wonderful women who are participating in this event, including Bing, who just gave a really great talk. Okay, so my official title at Cawthron is Senior Ocean Data Scientist. So that means that I get to specialize in all things ocean related. But instead of having you look at a picture of me while I'm telling you about the wonderful things I get to do, I thought this would be a good opportunity to introduce you to my two favorite at-home coworkers, Tom and Olive Briscoe. Tom and Olive both love a good Zoom meeting, so I wouldn't be surprised if one of them make an appearance between now and the end of my talk. But while Tom and Olive are busy typing on my keyboard and interrupting my important meetings, I get to do really fun things too. I get to use machine learning and AI algorithms to identify interesting patterns in the ocean, use multiple data streams and the Internet of Things to explore near real-time monitoring possibilities, and think of really creative ways to visualize data and to communicate that data to a variety of stakeholders and end users. But I didn't always know that I wanted to be a data scientist. In fact, when I was going to school, data science actually wasn't even a thing. When I was an undergrad, I studied environmental sciences. And it wasn't really until I started working on my PhD in ocean sciences that I started to really work closely with data. So what I was doing was looking at highly migratory species, so sharks, whales, and in particular sea turtles, and trying to use data to identify where they go in the ocean and why they go there. Why cross an entire ocean basin to find a good spot for food or to reproduce? What was the data that was underlying that information that we could use to monitor and predict where these animals might go to help best protect them and conserve them? So I carried that work on as a postdoc at Stanford University, and that was really my time that I got to hone my statistical and programming skills, all the while still thinking of myself very much as a marine scientist, not necessarily a data scientist. It hadn't really made its way into academia just yet, but it was at Stanford that I attended the Women in Data Science event and started to really get involved with the Women in Data Science community. And then that just carried me forward into getting involved with other organizations, including Women in Machine Learning and Data Science, Our Ladies, Pi Ladies. I'm sure all of you have heard of these organizations before. And it was really interesting because I started to realize that a lot of the skill sets and the tools that I was using in my work, data scientists were also using, and I just happened to be using it in a more non-traditional way, but there was a lot of overlap and a lot of synthesis. And the more that I got involved and started participating and even co-hosting some of these events myself, the more of a warm welcome and support that I felt with the entire data science community. When I first started, we've all seen this classic Venn diagram of the key disciplines that make up the field of data science. And when I first started out, I was thinking, how does this diagram really relate to me? Because I hadn't been classically trained as a data scientist. And I've always loved computers and learning about new tools and technologies with the computer. And I have to admit, I haven't always loved math because originally I wasn't very good at it, but the more that I studied and the more I started to solve complex mathematical problems through coding and programming, I got really excited and really interested in it. But it was really this domain knowledge. I forgot to tell you about the cute little math and statistics part of that, but it was really the domain knowledge that was really what hooked me into data science. And it was my love of the ocean, which I share with my dog, Betty, who also loves the ocean, that I really found my entry point into the field of data science. And what I really want, the message that I want to share, especially if you're just getting into the field of data science, is that it doesn't necessarily have to be through one of these more traditional avenues of computer science or mathematics. It's amazing if it is, but I want you to feel that no matter what your background is, we've all arrived here today because we love data and we love solving problems with data. And my entry point was through the domain knowledge and my love of using data to solve ocean-related problems. And that's how I identify as a data scientist. And that's how I make this Venn diagram work for me and relevant to me. So speaking of the ocean, when we look at the ocean, we typically only see the surface, but what we're actually trying to protect and manage for actually sits beneath the ocean surface more often than not. The problem is that the ocean is constantly moving in space and time. And even though this is a static picture of the ocean, hopefully each of you can recall a day that you spent at the ocean, or maybe you were out on the water on a boat somewhere and you could see the water moving all around you. If you've ever been seasick, then you've felt how often the ocean moves around you, and it just won't stop moving. But the point is that given that the ocean is constantly moving in space and time, and its inhabitants, its animals are constantly moving, it's made it inherently difficult as an oceanographer to study and collect data in a standardized way that has allowed us to manage and predict our interactions with this unique and complex system. And it's only really been in the past few decades that we have had the technology through satellites and through ocean sensors that we've been able to start accumulating large volumes of data in the ocean. And what this has done is propelled the field forward in ways that we can now start using data-driven tools to best manage this dynamic environment, and specifically doing it in a time frame that is relevant to the state of the ocean. And I'm talking about near real-time and real-time applications. So what I want to do for the rest of the talk today is move into some examples of how we can use data to manage our ocean and the resources that we find in it. So I'll walk you through 3 short examples. The first one is some of the work that I did at Stanford University, and that was using machine learning models and near real-time data streams to protect and conserve highly migratory species. The second and third scenario is work that I'm currently doing at Cawthron, and that involves using deep learning models for aquaculture and being able to provide data intelligence to aquaculture farmers so that they can make the best decisions about their farm in real time. And then the third scenario actually works with global climate models and how we can predict seafood safety and human health under changing ocean conditions, especially in a warming climate. So let's look at our first scenario here, using data science for species protection. And I want to take you off the shores of New Zealand, across the Pacific Ocean, and to the west coast of the United States here. And there's a swordfish fishery that operates off of the coast of California. And this fishery primarily targets swordfish, but it has experienced the unwanted or the accidental catch of several protected species, including sharks, marine mammals, and sea turtles. And this was a real challenge for the fishery because it's a multi-million-dollar-a-year fishery that was at risk of closing because of these unintended interactions. So the fishery came to us and asked us for help to try to identify if we could help them find areas where there might be a high probability of swordfish, but a low probability of these protected species. And for that reason, we developed predictive models. So we use modeling frameworks with near real-time data streams. And that included where the species might be on a given day. So location data from satellite tags or even fisheries observer data from the boat. We combine that with environmental data layers. So a lot of these species have specific environmental requirements that they prefer. So for sea turtles, they like warmer water, whereas a female sea lion may try to look for places with a lot of food, so high productivity, because they have to in turn nurse their young to allow them to grow. So what we did was we trained supervised machine learning models for each individual species, and we generated these predicted habitat suitabilities or habitat preference surface layers so that we knew what those correlates might be for each individual species. And then we took all of those individual layers and we integrated them into one unique data-driven tool that we called EcoCast. And EcoCast is essentially a nowcast tool that fishermen can access on a daily basis that's updated in near real time, that provides them from this model data, provides them accurate information of places that they should try to fish if they want to catch swordfish. So that would be these places in blue. They can go out to these places in blue and more predictably catch swordfish while avoiding and reducing their interaction with the protected species. Whereas if they moved into the areas in red on a given day, they're more likely to encounter those protected species. And this work here was a really pivotal experiment because it launched the sort of the ocean community into something called dynamic ocean management. Typically, ocean management has followed terrestrial management, where you draw lines around an area, kind of like a park on land. You would do that in the ocean. And this idea was more that management and those areas that you'd want to protect, they'll change in space and time because the ocean, its inhabitants and its users are also changing and moving around in space and time. So that was work that I did previously. And then I want to tell you more about the work that I'm currently doing at Cawthron. So Cawthron is New Zealand's largest independent science organization. And Cawthron just celebrated a pretty big milestone birthday recently. Cawthron cuts across a lot of disciplines, but one of the key disciplines that I work on is the aquaculture industry. And Cawthron, in partnership with other organizations, including Victoria University, have funded programs through MB and the National Science Challenge as well to identify how we can develop creative and innovative technologies for sustainable aquaculture management. So what I'd like to do is show you a little scenario of some of the work that we're doing in the aquaculture industry. And if you may not know this, aquaculture, the importance of aquaculture is that it's one of New Zealand's largest export industries. So over $700 million a year in revenue, and that's expected to grow up to $1 billion a year in the next few years. So being able to provide farmers with data-driven information so that they can make the best management decisions as they scale and grow into even bigger and bigger operations is really critical. So there's a lot that goes into aquaculture management and a lot of challenges that the farmers face. And I won't be able to cover them all in this talk. There's a lot of nuances, but this is just a high level view of a potential scenario as an aquaculture farmer. So I want you to imagine that you are a mussel farmer, and specifically that you're a mussel farmer in the Marlborough Sounds, which is here on the top of the south. And if we look at a little zoomed in view of this location, let's say that you live in the nice town of Havelock, but your farm is all the way in the Outer Sounds area here. And every day you need to go check on your farm. So you get in your boat and it takes you several hours to get there. And so that's time and resources, fuel, to be able to get out there. And once you're there, there's no guarantee that you'll actually be able to access your farm. Oftentimes the weather and the ocean conditions somewhere inshore near Havelock may be completely different than what you may encounter in the Outer Sounds. It may be a really windy day, so you have large waves and you can't actually monitor your crop. So that's one potential challenge. If you are able to get out to your farm, this is what your farm looks like. You won't even necessarily be able to see your crop because if you recall, a lot of what we manage for is beneath the ocean surface. So what you would typically see are these buoys, these long lines of buoys here, or these floats that form the backbone of these series of hundreds of ropes that support the mussels as they grow. And so just to give you an example of what that looks like from underwater, you can see here these ropes, and these are all the mussels that will grow on an individual rope, and it'll kind of snake up and down vertically for across the entire farm. And all of these ropes are held up by these buoys at the surface. So you can imagine that manually checking each one of these buoys individually is time consuming and labor intensive. But it's really important for the viability for the farmers, because as the mussels grow in this rope, they get bigger and they start to weigh down these buoys on the surface. And as the buoys get weighed down, they may take on water, or they may even detached from the line during a storm and float away. And if that happens, a farmer can lose tens of thousands of dollars in an instant. So being able to manage your farm in real time and know what's going on, not only with the health of your crop, but also the structures that support your crop, is really important. And so what we're trying to do is work with farmers to find ways to help them automate this process through remote monitoring and also artificial intelligence as well. One of the ways that we're doing that is trying to provide a bigger scale image of what the farmers are able to see. And this includes satellite imagery, so kind of a bird's eye view of what their farm looks like from above, and coupling that with surface information through some of our custom ocean instrumentation that our fantastic staff at Cawthron build and put together, and then combining that with some of the robotics work that's coming out of the University of Canterbury that uses underwater drones to help us look at each individual mussel and then use edge computing so that we can actually get a sense of what the mussel health is and what that looks like on a line per line basis. So some of the work that has come out so far of this that we've been working on, in particular with Bing, who spoke really well to some of this work, is looking at the mussel floats themselves, so that the buoys. We've been focusing on the buoys. So Bing and some of her students have done an amazing job with trying to use AI approaches to automatically detect buoys using image segmentation. And that is really difficult because if you think about it, it's really easy to to spot a buoy on a nice clear day where there's a nice contrast with the surface of the water and the buoy itself. But when sea state conditions change and maybe it's cloudy, there's low visibility, or there are big waves, it's a much harder process to do. In addition, it's important to identify habitat displacement and negative impacts between farms and protected marine species. And so using deep learning for dolphin echolocation is also another tool that has come out of this work. So a lot of really interesting work that is being done in this space. So I've talked a lot about how the ocean moves around us on a daily basis, but the thing that we also have to keep in mind is that the ocean is constantly changing through time. And that is in the form of marine heat waves. So a marine heat wave is essentially a short period of enormously warm temperatures in the ocean, but that also takes us into the longer term view of climate change and the role of climate change in our ocean. And I think this is really timely because we have this wonderful climate change panel later on this evening. So I want to wrap up my talk today talking about a project that we're working on that's incorporating climate change and how we think about seafood safety and human consumption. So there's some algae out there that can be quite toxic if it blooms, and you have these kind of massive areas of algae. And so they're called harmful algal blooms. And if fish eat that algae, and then we in turn as humans eat that fish, we are exposing ourselves to poisoning, seafood poisoning, or potentially even worse situations. And so it's really important to monitor and understand toxic situations in the ocean. And so one thing that we're doing is we're collaborating with some folks in Japan at Kochi University to explore how different species of algae and toxic algae may actually expand their range and move further out between Japan and New Zealand. And so what we're doing is we're using global climate models, so predicting out 50 years and 100 years, and we're combining that with lab growth experiments where we can actually find that exact range of temperatures and ocean conditions that will promote or contract that expansion. And then we can start to run models to identify what that range expansion might look like in a warming ocean. So that work is just getting underway. So please stay tuned for how that one unfolds. So I've covered a lot today, but what I want to basically impart is that we can use data science in the ocean for a variety of scenarios, whether that's species protection and conservation, or for helping farmers manage their farms in an aquaculture setting, to even thinking longer term with climate change and how we can best prepare for seafood safety and human health. And while these are very diverse sort of scenarios, they all have a common thread, and that they all integrate multiple streams of data, and they use an artificial intelligence approach to them. But that key element, if we think back to that Venn diagram, is that domain knowledge. And that's something that really adds value on top of all of these other great tools that we're using to solve these problems. And the bonus is that we get to create novel tools and technologies and deliver this information so that people can make the best information moving forward. So I want to leave you with one final message, take-home message. When you look at the ocean, typically this might be what you see. You see a nice calm day, you see the sun is shining, maybe there's a little ripple on the surface of the ocean, maybe a little breeze in the air. But as an ocean data scientist, this is what I see when I look at the ocean. I see a wealth of data and a wealth of information to help us best manage and protect our ocean's resources, not only now, but for future generations to come. So with that, I want to say a big thank you to Women in Data Science and to all of our collaborators and sponsors today. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Dana, for that very interesting talk. That was a fantastic presentation. I don't see any questions on the Q&A, but I do have one question, and that this is more general. fisheries. So it kind of ties in with what you presented and what Kep talked about earlier, which is this idea of the data we have and how well it's able to inform the processes that we're studying. So for example, I know, having worked with Cap on a project, that you don't often have the information that you need in your data to actually estimate the parameters that you're interested in. And so do you find that that's a problem? And how does AI help, if at all, or how do you deal with that?
Yeah, that's a really great question and a great point, especially because there are certain areas in the ocean that have been really well studied, and we have an abundant amount of data, and it's very easy to take on these approaches. Whereas there are some areas, even in our own backyard, where we're still very data deficient, even thinking about how we can protect some of our largest and most diverse species that move through New Zealand waters. New Zealand has one of the most diverse range of species globally, and so it's even more important that we find ways to protect them. In the situation where we are data deficient, it really forces us to try to find novel ways and creative ways that we can use the data that we have, or even try to find correlates and parallels with data. In some situations, we may know that there's a species that we don't have a lot of data on, but we know that there's another species that also tends to move in the same areas and have sort of the same general patterns that we might be able to use as proxies. So there's a lot of techniques that we can use, but this is definitely an area that we do need to keep thinking about, and especially around uncertainty and sensitivity around some of these models. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'll ask one more question because it ties in quite nicely with the talk that's coming next from Kirikowhai. And that's a question from Karen Gibson, who says, are you working with iwi around this fantastic data for fisheries and mussel farming and so on?
Yes. Yeah, so as part of our MB funded data science for aquaculture, as well as our National Science Challenge, SIFTI precision aquaculture programs, we are working with iwi. We do definitely have a Vision Mataranga component that is involved in that. So yeah, I'd love to. I know we're short on time, and I'd love to talk more about that, and be happy to later on expand on that and answer any other questions. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So as thanks very much for that answer. And as a reminder, if you're sticking around and the speakers are able to speak around, we'll have some time once all the sessions are finished for people to ask questions verbally, but also do ask questions in the Q&A as we're going. Okay, thanks very much, Dana. We'll now move on to our next speaker. And I'm really grateful to have Kirikowhai talking today. And it links into that last question, which is about working with iwi. And this is really what Kirikowhai does. So Kirikowhai is a leading Maori data and information specialist, and she focuses on harnessing information to empower iwi, hapu, whanau, and community development. And I'm really looking forward to hearing about her work and what she has, what she's working on, and how she works with iwi. So I'll invite Kirikowhai to share her screen so that she can go through her presentation. Okay. Over to you, Kirikowhai.
Kia ora, thank you, Ehua. Tuatahi tēnei taku mihi atu ki a koutou. Ngā mihi roto I ngā tini āhuatanga o te wā. Ko Kirikowhai Mikaere tēnei, he uri no te wako tarawa, no tūhaurangi, no Ngāti Whakaue, e mihi ana ki a koutou e hono mai nei. So thank you very much for the opportunity to come along and share a couple of insights around the work that I do. And it really is my privilege and honour tonight to be able to participate in this amazing kaupapa woman in data science. I'm just going to share, I was asked to share about some Māori data sovereignty, kaupapa and kōrero, and then also I thought I would ground that in the mahi that I work on every day in the mana o rite relationship. So as I said, I'm gonna probably start a bit high level and talk about Indigenous data sovereignty, how that connects into Māori data sovereignty, and then our mana orite relationship agreements and our step towards Māori data sovereignty and the work that we do. So to give a bit of context, I've been working in the Māori data and statistics space for probably nearly 20 years. I worked as a public servant for 10 of those years for Statistics New Zealand as a private secretary statistics across the a senior advisor across the official statistics system. And then for the last 10 years, I have been working primarily in our communities with iwi Māori organisations, Māori businesses and communities. And I lead the technicians to the Data Iwi Leadership Group under the National Iwi Chairs Forum. And so that's probably the context that I'm going to bring to the discussion today. I always try to start with this picture, and I think it ties in nicely to the presentation before, and I think it was Dana's visualization of the ocean and all the data that sits within the ocean. And this here is a picture taken from a Māori Data Futures hui that we held with SIFTI, with one of the National Science Challenges at Victoria University in Te Herenga Waka Marae. And I start with this picture because this really is a symbol. Our wharenui are a symbol of some of our original data repositories. And when you look around this room, you can see within the carvings, the whakairo and the tukutuku panels, the weaving, that is how we have held data and transmitted data for generations. And so I start with this picture to ground the concept that we're not new to data, iwi, Indigenous people. We have long been data warriors, and we have models of how we have held, stored and transmitted that data. In the context of data sovereignty and Indigenous data sovereignty and Māori data sovereignty, that's where we start to talk about, I guess, the modernisation and the digitisation of data. And so Indigenous data sovereignty, and I've taken this definition from some of our colleagues in America, is about the rights of a nation to govern the collection, ownership and application of its own data. And when people think of data sovereignty, there's a general sort of understanding that data sovereignty states that data is subject to the laws of the nation within which it is stored. And so I guess default to data residency. But Indigenous data sovereignty is about stating that data should be subject to the laws of the nation, including tribal nations from which it is collected. There has been and there continues to be a huge sort of growing global recognition of the importance of Indigenous data and the rights of Indigenous peoples when it comes to data from the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples through to the World Health Organization. There's been a chapter in the International Open Data Charter, and there are also growing Indigenous data sovereignty communities and networks across the world. And here are just a few examples from Australia to America, and then there is the First Nations Institute of Governance Centre in Canada. People might have heard of the OCAP principles: ownership, control, access and possession. And they really have been leading in this space, I think, some of our Canadian colleagues for probably the last couple of decades. There is the Global Indigenous Data Alliance, or GIDA, and then you'll see there, I'll make a plug for one of my colleagues, Tahu Kukutai's book, Indigenous Data Sovereignty, that she edited with John Taylor. Indigenous data sovereignty is also and has also been a significant issue here in Aotearoa. We have Te Manararonga, the Māori Data Sovereignty Network, which connects across all of those different global networks as well. There are a lot more iwi or tribal groups wanting to access and have possession of data for their own use, whether that be treaty claims, development, the data that's gone into the integrated data infrastructure, and probably more recently, people would have seen whānau ora and their attempts to get access to data and having to take the Ministry of Health to court. There's also the Data Iwi Leaders Group under the National Iwi Chairs Forum, and Te Kāhui Raronga is the trust that I lead, which is the operations arm for the advocacy of the chairs under the National Iwi Chairs Forum in relation to data and digital development. people often ask, well, what is Māori data sovereignty? It's primarily concerned with protecting iwi and Māori rights of access to data. It's concerned with participation in data integration activities, and it's about partnership and governance or ownership of data. Ultimately, it's about how we support the realisation of iwi, hapu and whānau aspirations and recognise that Māori data should be subject to Māori governance. It really is a key mechanism for enabling self-determination and innovation for us. And here's probably a nice succinct definition for people. Māori data sovereignty is the right of iwi Māori to access, to use, to have governance and control over iwi Māori data. What is Māori data is often the question that people ask us. And that really, it's quite broad, and you'll see here from this explanation, data, it's about data that's self-generated, or data from us, from our organisations, from our individuals, from our businesses. But it's also data about us, used to describe or compare Māori collectives. And it's data from and about the environments that we have connection with. So some of those things emerging from the research on Māori resources. And so very broad, I guess, but that's with intention. Why is Māori data sovereignty important? And it's really when we talk about access and use, that's about how we transform the lives of our people, and governance and control to ensure the data is relevant and responsive. And a lot of the time, really, as Māori, we're asked to just consume the data that people collect about us, or they collect from our environment, as opposed to recognising that actually sometimes we need to be designing the data so it's a lot more relevant to the decisions that we make about us and about our own future. So the mana orite relationship agreements are agreements that the Data Iwi Leadership Group have written, and they're really, I guess, a way for us to start to walk the talk of Māori data sovereignty and walk towards that aspiration of Māori data sovereignty and our contribution towards that. So mana orite relationship agreement, with intention, we have one with Statistics New Zealand, as the lead government agency in their capacity as the chief data steward for the data system, and obviously the government statistician. Effectively, the agreement embodies the intention of the Data Iwi Leadership Group and Statistics New Zealand to establish a mana orite te tiriti relationship. And by mana orite, we mean that the parties have equal explanatory power, and I do acknowledge in a statistical and a data sense that has a different definition, but in the context of this agreement, that's about acknowledging and accepting that our knowledge system, that our Te Ao Māori knowledge system, our perspectives and our worldviews have equal validity at the decision-making table, particularly decisions that are being made about the future of the data ecosystem. It is in addition to and not a substitute for the broader Māori Crown relationship. I thought I'd show some photos here of our initial meetings between some of our Data Iwi Leadership Group chairs and the executive leadership from Statistics New Zealand. And really just to show that this has been a relationship that we have invested a lot of time in, and we have had some pretty hard conversations. We can see by the frowns on some of our chairs' faces. But we've also had some quite light-hearted conversations, and ultimately in bringing the executive leadership to one of our oldest whare here in Rotorua, Nokuthaba, we set out the expectations of a mana orite relationship agreement. And that's an agreement that we had drafted as the Data Iwi Leadership Group. It holds not just the expectations of the relationship, but very, very clear principles or uaratanga around how we expect to behave, how we expect each other to behave in the relationship. And we expect that we will not always agree, but that we will come back to the table to talk again about how we move forward in this space around data decisions for Aotearoa. Why did we do this? Te oranga whānui o Aotearoa. And that's really the well-being of Aotearoa and all those who call it home. So by realizing the potential of data to make a sustainable, positive difference to outcomes for iwi, for hapu and whānau, and for all those who call Aotearoa home, that's why we have embarked on this mana orite relationship with Statistics New Zealand, with the lead data agency. In terms of how it's intended to work, this whakatauki proverb we've put in here is a nice way to explain how we think we come to the table together. So nā tōraudo, nā takuraudo, ka ora ai te iwi. There's a mutual recognition and acknowledgement. So with the fruits that they bring, the fruits that we bring, there will be a well-being for all. And recognising that Statistics New Zealand have leadership in the data space for government, but so does the Data Iwi Leadership Group. And we both bring expertise, mandate and commitment to the relationship. What have we achieved? There's been some pretty big achievements, and not just smiles along the way, but we have got very strong working relationships and working partnerships between the National Iwi Chairs Forum, the Data Iwi Leadership Group, and government through Mark, who's now the current government statistician. And we have those strong work programs with Statistics New Zealand, but also other government agencies in relation to Māori and iwi data. But I thought I'd just, I guess, highlight a few of the achievements. So one of those is the development of a te reo rangatira data set, and we have had our iwi looking, sort of moving from being data consumers to being data designers, and designing how we would collect information about not just te reo Māori as a language, but te reo rangatira as a component of our knowledge system. Also, Māori data governance, we held big co-design workshops and with the government and Te Ao Māori around a Māori data governance model to sit across the New Zealand government data system. There's a link there to our website, and people can request the reports that came out of that big co-design process, Tāwhiti Nuku, and also now there is a smaller ohu or steering group that is looking at how we look to implement that model across the data system. And there are 4 kāwanatanga or government representatives, 4 Te Ao Māori representatives designing the implementation of that. Legislative change under the Mana Orite Relationship Agreement and through our work plan, we have had direct input into the drafting of the new statistics and data bill that's going through the submission process at the moment. And then I wanted to share tonight also our iwi data innovation, or te whata. So we've created a data visualization platform, and you can visit it here, tewhata.io. And that is a platform created by, for and with iwi, and it is primarily focused on distributing and disseminating iwi data directly to the iwi, but also more recently, and I've got a couple of pictures here, we have created a bespoke page so that we can disseminate COVID-19 data, COVID-19 vaccination status data, directly to our iwi and the campaigns happening across the country on behalf of iwi. And so we provide that data at a mesh block level daily out directly to, I think there are over 80 iwi connected in to the platform, and it is helping each of them understand where they should prioritise their efforts and resource around boosting the vaccination rates for their area. We also have, for iwi, when they connect in, a few more insights around sort of access and willingness scores for their particular areas based on other data sets that we've been able to pull. So it's not just about where people are in terms of the low vaccination rates, but what are other factors that contribute to the lack of vaccinations across our communities. And so that's one of the achievements we're really proud of, Te Whata. There is the open pages that everybody can access. When iwi, they get a login, they go through a process of getting a login to Te Whata, and they get to tailor their pages for themselves. They get to add their narrative should they want to alongside their statistics, and they get to access more detailed information for their particular areas. The next steps for us in terms of the Mana Orite space and and walking towards Māori data sovereignty aspirations. We have recently signed a mana orite relationship agreement with the Department of Internal Affairs as the lead digital agency across the government system. And actually today meeting with a whole lot of the different executive leaderships about how we walk the talk of those principles and how we make sure that that is socialised and normalised in a Te Tiriti partnership, I guess, relationship. We have secured a iwi-led collections component to the 2023 census, and there will be a particular rohe where the iwi will lead out the collection and looking to build capability collection capability for iwi and analytical capability for iwi. And then lastly, we're in discussions with our colleagues in Canada about their Indigenous data governance program, and they are very interested in our one and how we might be able to collaborate going forward. I think that's me. I tried to probably not take up too much time today in terms of the presentation, but really just wanted to share at a high level some of the work that we're doing and contribute to the kite of the kōrero here for women in data science. So, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou.
Thank you very much for that presentation and for giving us the insights into the work that you do. There are some questions that people have asked, and I will ask. Desi Broughton has raised a few questions, and I'll just read them. So she said that something she noticed in your presentation was the relatively light touch on tiriti. Is that intentional? And is there a risk in relying on tiriti principles as the sole explanatory content for Māori data sovereignty? Why or why not?
Yeah, so I think it is intentional in terms of the light touch, and we're quite fortunate in the data iwi leadership space that we have some very capable leaders who have very strong mātauranga, and they have intentionally translated for us the particular principles that guide the relationship that we have for the context of data and then for the context of digital. One of the other things we're very clear on in terms of the data iwi leadership group is we are not the Te Tiriti partner. We represent a huge collective of them in the context of the National Iwi Chairs Forum, but that partnership sits between individual iwi and individual hapu in the Crown. And we're always very supportive and big advocates of that.
Okay, all right, thank you. Are you, just a question, are you able to stay on a bit longer, or do you need to shoot up to go?
Yeah, I probably need to
go.
Off, sorry.
Okay.
Young kids, I've got to head off to.
Yeah. Just that there were quite a few questions. So I don't know if you mind people getting in touch with you to raise their questions, because we need to move on to the next.
Yeah, no, if somebody's able to email me the questions, I can try and sort of answer those.
Yeah, okay. All right, thank you. So I know a few people have raised a few questions here, and Kirikowhai has to go. We're really grateful for taking the time to be with us and give us some insights into your work. And we're recording this, and we'll have a record of the questions, and we'll forward them to you afterwards. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Hakite.
Hakite. Okay, apologies to those who weren't able to have their questions answered, but as I said, we'll forward them to Kirikowhai afterwards. But for now, we have an exciting panel coming up. And one of the things or a thread that has come up in some of the talks that you've been listening to is fisheries and the ocean and the environment. And we thought it would be quite good to wrap this up by having a panel discussion on tackling climate change with data. And I'm delighted that we were able to gather 4 people to be involved in this panel. So Kate, who you've already met and has been taking part in this event already. She'll facilitate that panel. And with her as panelists are Silvina Pugliese, Antonia Burbidge, and Kennie Tsui. So they both work in the climate change space, and I won't introduce them. I think they'll be able to introduce themselves during the panel discussion. So over to you, Kate.
Thank you. Great. So climate change, we all know, is one of the most urgent issues of our time. I myself am very passionate about it. Most recently, I've been working at EECA for the last 16, 17 months, and a lot of the focus of my work there has been on energy systems modelling and mapping out the impacts in terms of trying to reduce carbon emissions associated with energy use. And I'm really, really delighted to be here. I'm also really pleased, even now that I've moved on to a new role at Te Pūtea Mātua Reserve Bank of New Zealand, that as kaitiaki of the New Zealand financial ecosystem, we're tasked with maintaining and ensuring financial stability. And we really act collaboratively to promote prosperity and well-being of all New Zealanders. And this is by promoting sound and dynamic monetary and financial systems. But one of the key things to that, and the heart of our mandate, is stability, and stability in terms of prices, monetary stability, in terms of the broader financial system, and anything that challenges the stability of the financial system and our economy is also our core business. So this panel is still very dear to my heart. Climate change is something that really impacts our economy, and society is changing as a result of it. The physical impacts of climate change, such as drought, storms, put urgent pressure on the world around us. And climate change has affected and will continue to affect our environment and our way of living. Both the physical impacts of climate change itself and the impacts of transitioning to a low carbon economy hold risks for the financial system, and if we don't really focus on them, really hold risks for the future of our planet. So how about we get into what we're talking about today? But before I do, I'll give a little plug. We do actually have a research paper that we published out of Te Pūtea Mātua, which is Climate Changed. That is available on our website. I'll share that in the link. But now I will go into introducing our wonderful panelists. Our panelists today are Antonia Burbidge. Antonia is the Manager of Buildings, Industry, Transport and Energy at the Climate Change Commission. What's wonderful about Antonia is that she's been leading a lot of the work at the Climate Change Commission to really look at the modelling. While she's not a data scientist, she is a avid user of data, and she's one of the strongest voices that we have really in terms of ensuring that we have strong leadership from women in the focus of the fight against climate change. Our next panellist is Kennie Tsui. Kennie is the Chief Executive of the New Zealand Geothermal Association, and prior to this, she was the Principal Analyst at the Climate Change Commission and was heavily involved in developing the recent report, Inaya Tono Nei, a Low Emissions Future for New Zealand. And our final panellist this evening is Dr. Silvina Pugliese, one of my former team members at EECA. Silvina is a data scientist at EECA, where she focuses on energy system modelling and developing data-driven insights to improve business performance and address the impacts of climate change. Silvina is really passionate about developing really amazing data visualization tools. You'll find a lot of those on the EECA website. And she has a background in chemical engineering and physics. She's also an alumni of the Marie Curie Actions Research Program, and she recently completed her PhD in physics at Victoria University of Wellington. So now I would like to just open up to the panel. So firstly, we'll go through and meet each of our panelists. they'll all have about 3 minutes to share a little bit about their work, the background of their organisation, and then we'll go into some of the Q&A. So welcome. Thank you for being here today. Really, really pleased to see you all. I wonder, Antonia, if you could please provide a brief introduction to yourself and organisation and the role of data in informing your organisational purpose or activities.
Kia ora koutou, ko Antonia Burbidge aho. I'd like to start by thanking you, Kate, actually, for the invitation to join the panel and the very, very generous introduction. So thank you for that. So as Kate said, I currently lead the Commission's Industry, Transport, Buildings and Energy team. And just a bit of background about the Commission. So He Pouarangi, which is the Climate Change Commission, is an independent government agency. Our purpose is to provide expert independent advice to the government on mitigating climate change and adapting to the effects of climate change. And we also monitor and review the government's progress on its emissions reductions and adaptation goals. So a bit more about who we are. We're led by a board of 8 commissioners, and there are around 40 staff at the Commission, maybe 50 now, we're growing a bit, of which I'm one of those staff. And our backgrounds are, lots of the staff have analytical backgrounds, and then we have comms and engagement and support staff in there as well. So you might know us because we advised the government last May, and Kennie was part of the team that did that, on what are known as emissions budgets and the emissions reduction plan. Together, those two set out the options to for how to transition Aotearoa to a low emissions society. I lead a team of people who have a great mix of skills. We have some modelers and some policy experts in there, and we try to blend those skills to create evidence-led and independent advice for government. And the team that I lead looks after those energy and transport sectors. So the Commission relies heavily on data and modelling to do its work. We do complementary analytical work, but it's fair to say that data plays a really major part in the work that we do. To give advice on the journey towards our 2050 goals required a thorough understanding of current emissions in Aotearoa and the emissions reduction potential, and lots of that info came through data. And I'll stop there, just conscious of time. Thank you, Kate.
Kia ora, thank you so much. Maybe we'll hand over to Kennie next, and then followed by Silvina.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you. Lovely to see everyone, and also very delighted to be here tonight. Tēnā koutou katoa tehi Māori ora, inga mana, e ra neo, e na iwi. E ru, rangitira mai, tēnā koutou, ko kini toi tanga iwa. So thank you so much, and thank you, Antonia, and lovely to see you again. So I left the Commission and then joined the New Zealand Geothermal Association in July last year. So maybe a little bit of background about the association itself and then the geothermal sector. So the New Zealand Geothermal Association was founded in 1992. So this year we are celebrating our 30th anniversary. So the association itself, we are membership based, so have got a very broad membership. So from electricity generators, engineering consulting firm, and also regional council and our Māori iwi trusts. We have 26 corporate members and over 450 individual members. We are also one of the 27 international geothermal associations and organizations. So we have got very good international linkage. So what the association's vision is to create a sustainable future for Aotearoa, New Zealand. And it's under the 4 purposes. The first one is connection. Second one, innovation. Third, efficacy. And 4th, education. And all of these interconnect to each other and also share a lot of data and analytics. So a little bit about the geothermal sector in New Zealand, for those of you might be less familiar with it. So Aotearoa, New Zealand is a world leader with one of the largest developed geothermal industry in the world. And we are the 5th largest installed generation capacity. And we are very, very fortunate to have this gift to us. And looking into a number of modeling, data, analytics, which I'm sure that we're going to talk about tonight. And it's crucial to look into how we decarbonize our journey for the next few decades. So I'm going to stop here and then hand over to Sylvia. And then I'm sure that when we come back, we talk about a lot more about how we utilize and share our knowledge.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you, Kate. I'm very humbled to be part of this panel along with Antonia and Kennie. I'm going to share the screen because I have a presentation which will help me show the work that we do at EECA involving data. I am a data scientist at EECA. EECA is the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Authority. It's a Crown agency focused on supporting, promoting, and encouraging the use of renewable energy and energy efficiency and energy conservation. We support the energy transition through a range of co-funding mechanisms and support to individuals and businesses. And this is because the purpose of EECA is to mobilize New Zealanders to be world leaders in clean and clever energy use. Our strategic focus areas are productive and low emissions business, efficient and low emissions transport, energy efficient homes, government leadership, and engaging hearts and minds. This last focus area is through the Gen Less campaign, which you might have seen in the media, where we encourage people across New Zealand to engage in reducing their energy-related carbon emissions. When we think about where we use data in EECA is very much everywhere, basically in two different ways. We use data internally in the organization to inform our programs, to make sure that the EECA's programs are led by sound evidence and that they will deliver clear benefits to New Zealand. And we are also committed to the open dataset community by publishing open data and open data tools along with our reports and our publications to support the energy transition through the use of data and insights. Some examples of open data publications and open data tools that we have developed are the Energy End Use Database. This is a very important data asset because it is published every year with annual estimates of national energy consumption split by categories. And these categories are sector, fuel type, end use, and technologies. And through this visualization tool, people can also explore a further disaggregation of each of these categories. We find that it is very important that we communicate the data in an effective way and that we make data accessible to people. And that this is a very important tool to understand how much knowledge do we have about how energy is used in each sector of our society. Another tool is the New Zealand Energy Scenarios times New Zealand 2.0. This data tool is very interesting because it's the modeled data that we have obtained from the Times New Zealand model. This is a model from the entire energy sector, which we have developed at EECA in collaboration with Business New Zealand Energy Council and energy modeling experts from Switzerland, from the Paul Scherrer Institute. This is a very sophisticated model which involves a very large data set, which includes demand projections, techno-economic parameters for all the technologies considered in the model. These parameters are, for example, the cost projections of different technologies such as batteries. And it also considers the energy resources potential in New Zealand and, of course, the emission factors to be able to calculate the emissions. The tool is very sophisticated. It allows the user to obtain, to drill down different categories And the metrics that people can see are fuel consumption, installed capacity, and carbon emissions. And in all these data tools, people are able to download the open data and also download the charts. The regional heat demand database is a tool that displays real data of fuel consumption for industrial process heat by region in New Zealand. In this case, the data is aggregated to maintain the confidentiality of the individual businesses that provided data to EECA. The tool currently displays data for 2 regions only. This is Southland and Canterbury, but in the near future, next month actually, we are going to publish more data to complete the whole South Island in the visualization tool. The metrics that we can see here are fuel demand in gigawatt hours, installed capacity in megawatts, and also the age of the equipment, and how many burners and how many heat pumps and other type of equipment we have in each region. This is very important data because it's really showing us where the demand for energy is. And another example is the New Zealand public EV charger map. This is a visualization tool that shows currently available data sets that are relevant to the public network of EV charging. This data is used internally at EECA to inform the Low Emission Transport Fund, and it is also it has also been used for stakeholder consultation on the future of the EV charging public network. There are also other examples of data tools in the EECA website, and I strongly encourage everyone to look at our website. And in the GenLess website, we have also recently published data about how people relate to climate change. So there is data about a survey that has been done on more than 9,000 people from different demographic groups, such as age, gender, regions, and other aspects. And this data has been made available also for the first time. So EECA is committed to be active in sharing all the data behind our research and our reports, which we consider is highly important to mitigate climate change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Silvina. It's just a lovely trip down memory lane for me, watching all of this, and the work that I was able to do in my 18 months at EECA was just, I'm very, very proud of the work. I'm very proud of the work that the team's continuing to do, and delighted to have you here today. So for now, we'll kick off into the questions, and our first question is for Antonia. I think one of the really delightful things that we had happen last year was that the Climate Change Commission did so much engagement work within communities and across New Zealand, across the whole of Aotearoa. And there were a number of wonderful webinars that people could engage with, and a number of in-person events. Through that, you also did a lot of modelling, and there was a lot of data made available on the website. And this, I think, really helped to inform some of the submissions that you received. There were so many submissions from around New Zealand. Can you talk about some of the common data themes that came through in the submissions?
Yeah, happy to. So thank you for the question. So yeah, I think the Commission placed and continues to place a real focus on partnership as well as engagement and consultation. And yeah, we had those 15,000 submissions, and I think it was over 700 meetings in the end in the 1 year in 2020. And I think all of that was really important to gathering the insights and the data that we needed to inform the modeling that was made available on our website. And then there are two parts to the process that we did last year. We did a draft report that we put out for consultation, and then a final report. And we did get heaps of feedback on the draft report through the consultation process about what needed changing through our modeling. And it wasn't just the modeling, it was the input assumptions that went into the modeling, and the conclusions that were drawn. And our final advice did change significantly as a result of the inputs that we got from people. But in terms of the themes that we heard through the consultation, I think that the biggest one to draw for me was that the need to act is actually really well understood. We're not having a debate anymore about if climate change is real or if we should do something about it. I think that is fairly, it feels from the submissions fairly well settled, as does the sort of the potential magnitude of the consequence of failing to address climate change. And I think that coherence, that good understanding is a result of data-led science, and we've heard it tonight in almost every presentation, of that science being well communicated over an extended period of time. I had a quick look, and I mean, it didn't take a look really, but it's 32 years since the first IPCC report was published. It's not new information particularly, it's just information that's really coming through. I think where those submissions varied a lot, or more, was how Aotearoa, how we choose to respond. And there's quite a bit of difference in what people thought was the right response. You know, what is the role of different businesses and different regions and communities, and how far should we go and how fast should we go, and who carries the burden and who puts the effort in, and where does the impact of that effort fall, and what constitutes fair. And that's a really hard set of questions to answer, and I think data can go so far into helping that. But then maybe at some point it comes back to judgment, and thankfully that's the role of our commissioners, informed by the work and the advice that we give. So I think I would maybe highlight two things. One in my area, which is where I'm qualified best to speak, and that was to understand the emissions reduction potential in urban form, we had a lot of different figures about what the emissions are from our cities. So 5%, 10%, 15%. And I think without parameters, definitions, measurement, verification, good data sets, it's really hard to know the emissions reduction potential and to make recommendations. And so where we landed in that space was a recommendation around good data being fundamental to us being able to give good advice. And then another thing worth highlighting from our consultation feedback was around the need to establish a Māori emissions profile. We got lots of feedback around frustration around the inequity of evidence and information used to inform policy. And this just picks up on what we heard from Kirikowhai around data sovereignty as well in this space, and tikanga and commercial sensitivity all being important factors to consider when you think about a Māori emissions profile. So just sort of closing off for you, I think these examples kind of highlight that where we can base recommendations on solid data and evidence, if we can understand who's going to be impacted and where, we can think about recommendations for a transition that's both effective and just. And I think that's really the purpose of the commission. And I'll finish there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really insightful, and pleasing to see so much engagement and how important data is. So now I will ask Silvina a quick question. One of the things that is often not understood is the relationship between energy use and climate change. Could you briefly describe how key sectors in New Zealand could make a difference to, impact the reduction in carbon emissions in terms of energy use?
Yes, that's a great question, and it's important to talk about that. So then the way we use energy impacts our carbon emissions in a very direct way. We use energy in all sectors of our society, from residential homes to business, industries, transportation, and energy used in all these sectors accounts for 40% of the total greenhouse gas emissions in New Zealand. Actually, the largest emitting sector is agriculture in New Zealand, and the energy sector is the second largest emitting sector. However, the Climate Change Commission modeling has shown that what is expected is that the heavy lifting of emissions reductions will occur in the energy sector. So it is very important that the energy sector takes action very quickly. This is because we want to reach net zero by 2050, but actually we want to do that as fast as possible such that the cumulative emissions are low. And so the energy sector has a strong impact on how we are going to respond to climate change. And also, as more renewable energy sources are used in the system, the other way around is also true. So the impacts on the climate, like strong weather events, are going to impact the energy generation, for example. So it is important also to keep in mind that we need information about the climate and weather data to inform also the energy sector.
Thank you. And that's where energy modeling tools could really help. And
yes, so something that we consider at EECA is that high quality energy data is key for this challenge, because so as Antonia was saying, we need data to keep track of how we are moving forward. So for monitoring purposes, we need very high quality data and data that is regularly up to date. And also having data that is up to date is important for recalibrating our energy models. So it is important to keep in mind that these models, the result from the models are as good as the data inputs are. So we need to pay attention on that and review all the data inputs that we are using in our modeling. So that is really important.
Thank you. Okay, Kennie, you wear two hats. You were recently appointed as CEO of Geothermal New Zealand, and it's a lovely link actually, because Rosalind Archer, who has been involved with women in data science for a number of years, she used to be I think she was the president of Geothermal New Zealand, and you're also a board member at Engineering New Zealand, and I think she's the president of Engineering New Zealand as well. So Rosalind, for those that don't know, has recently moved over to Griffith University in Queensland. So so she's just left New Zealand. But Kennie, your experience really is quite interesting. One of the things that I'd really like to know about is, could you share some of the initiatives that are enabling more gender diversity in both the geothermal area and also in the Engineering New Zealand industry as well?
Thank you, Kate. And it's a really good question. So as those of you might know or might not be more aware of it, so in the engineering sector and also in the geothermal sector as well, approximately there are 85% male workforce compared to 15% of females. And that highlighted a number of challenges for the sectors. So in the geothermal field, we are doing a number of things to increase that female workforce to come and join the sector. So I recently had a competition, so it's the CEO of the day. So that was really good, very interesting. So future female, really young females, really keen to learn about the role, about the sector. So, and also a number of students also came forward. So, and also another field is the Engineering New Zealand. So it's also a membership organization in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and has been for a very long time an advocate about the gender balance. So back in 2020, so 2 years ago, so 3 sectors or 3 institutes came together. So it's Engineering New Zealand, New Zealand Institute of Architects, and also Association of Consulting Engineers. So these three institutes came together and recognized that there is a gap in our gender and also a number of areas in the sectors. Came together, signed up an accord, and really took a very strong efficacy and influential way. So the Diversity Agenda Accord was signed by over 50 firms. So those are the firms that belong to none of the three members. The first thing that we did is to survey a gender pay gap. And it was a very, very good monitor to demonstrate that the use of data, the insights of the data, and also how we track that. So we have been doing this for the last 24 months and highlighted that. So for the gender pay equity gap, there is getting smaller compared to the reports that was produced earlier this week. We still got a way to go. However, though, the gaps are closing up. So it's really a very positive sign. And then this month, the Gender Diversity Agenda also took a further step and established the first steering committee. So this is the first in Aotearoa, New Zealand. So came from 10 representatives all across the three professions and tasked to work through and deliver an even more improved agenda, and particularly focusing on the future workforce. So if you're interested, I'm happy to share more information after the talk tonight, and would be really welcome anyone who might be interested in the initiative as well.
Thank you so much. Okay, so now I'm going to go on to a couple of questions that we have here. And this will be open to any panelist now. So what would be some examples of innovative uses of data that could help address the climate crisis, either ones that you've been involved in your organisation or ones that you have seen used, or open source examples that are out there? You could take it away, Silvina, if you like.
Yes, I think the examples that I was showing at the beginning, these data tools that we have developed at EECA, they were actually developed when Kate was our manager. And I think what those projects have, what we have learned from those projects is that people need our help to really understand data. This data is very complex for someone who is not from the energy sector. And we really need to engage people from all backgrounds and across society. So having tools that are easy to understand, where people can also have access to the data, but also understand easily the meaning of what the data is telling. So this is why people are talking about storytelling in data everywhere. It's because it's really important to engage people and allow them to be part of this journey.
Wonderful, thank you. So my next question is probably for Antonia. Antonia, what are some of the biggest challenges in climate change where data and insight can be most readily applied to mitigate climate change? And how can everyday New Zealanders get involved in that?
You'd think I'd have learned where the mute button was by now, but I still struggle. So I have a sort of a partial answer for you, I think. So, and it's not one that's based in my area of expertise, but I'm going to, jog into it anyway. So to reduce emissions from the ag sector, we know that farmers need to understand what their emissions are and how the changes that they make on farm affect emissions. And I think that we have really good data. I mean, Silvina showed us earlier, we have excellent data for energy and for transport. And I would say that the data in the agriculture sector is just, it's not as deep as what we can find for ag. And so measuring progress towards emissions budgets and targets are going to require the actions that farmers will be taking to to be tracked so that we can understand how those actions are actually affecting New Zealand's emissions budgets and whether or not we are or aren't on track for our budgets. And that data flows need to go through a whole system from both, farmers need to understand what their current emissions are, they need to baseline it, and they need to see how the changes are going to have an effect on their emissions profile. And that needs to feed all the way up into the inventory, which has its own very strict set of rules governing it. And I think, so that in terms of a challenge, it's a huge challenge, I think, through the system. And I don't know how easy it is to apply it. And then the other challenge that I think we see more in my sector is around behavior change and understanding behavior change from a data side, and that's potential for emissions reductions, because I think that's another area where we don't have as good information.
Thank you. Kennie, did you have anything that you would like to add?
I think for the geothermal sector, a number of the innovative methodologies or tools, and also how people can realize that is, so two examples that I would like to give. So the first one is about the profiles of the geothermal resource. So a number of people might know that geothermal resources come from underground, but not many people know that is deeper and hotter. So the deeper we drill down to the earth crust, the hotter the temperature profile and the pressure would be. So the tools to measure that come into very important aspect of sharing to public about the heat profile and the enthalpy that it could provide to the process heat or electricity generation. So that is one example that I could think of, is the measurement about the resource. The second one is that the drilling aspect. So when you drill into the earth crust, and that is a very huge cost. So 40% of the project is associated with drilling. So that means that the smarter the drilling technologies and the smarter the data will definitely decrease the cost of drilling. And a number of the tools nationally and internationally have been working towards that.
Thank you. So this question is probably for Silvina. For the data scientists that are here in the audience today, what are some of the technologies and tools that you're using from modeling or building your visualizations? What are some of the tips that you might give to an aspiring data scientist on how that on which tools you're using?
Yes. So at EECA, we use a range of tools. For data analysis, we use Excel, SQL, and we use programming languages that are open source, such as Python, R, and sometimes Julia. And for the visualization tools, we use mainly Shiny, which is the package from the R programming language, and High Charts, which allows to create these interactive visualizations that are really nice. We are also using Power BI for internal reporting at EECA. And very importantly, we are migrating our data in the organization to the cloud using the Microsoft Azure platform. And this is important because as data grows, maintaining data sets becomes harder. So I think everyone who has an Excel file that becomes too big knows that it becomes really hard to maintain. And also that these data sets, they are very dynamic. So for example, data sets about the EV charging network, they change all the time because we have new chargers being installed and some chargers which become unavailable. So we need to keep this data up to date. So having the data in a centralized database, for example, is very useful. So data quality and proper data management is really important for the energy sector.
Wonderful, thank you. So we've actually run slightly over time. So what I might do is just put it out there for each of you to give your final thoughts on how people can use data to get involved in addressing climate change. We'll start with Kennie, then we'll go to Silvina, and we'll finish with Antonia.
Thank you, Kate. I think for the closing remarks, people will relate to is about their energy use, and particularly around home and also their transport. But one of the things that not many people know of is the separation between energy and electricity. So a number of the members or general public that I've spoken to since I started my role is to understand that, in fact, New Zealand, Aotearoa New Zealand, is a very, very fortunate place in the world that have so many different renewable candidates. So having that information in front of us really highlighted the use and the increased opportunity for renewable. And so I'm not only talking about geothermal, but also talking about other candidates such as solar, wind, biomass, and also hydropower. So that to me is a really powerful message to inform general public about our renewable energy profile.
Thank you. Silvina.
Yes. Well, I guess what I would like to highlight is the importance of having high quality data that is accessible to the public. This is also important for transparency so that everyone knows where the data is. The data has to be up to date, and it's important to keep our modeling up to date as well. And communication and coordination between agencies is key, such that we don't multiply our efforts when it's not necessary, so that we are using data sets from other organizations. And also to engage people. As Kate said at the beginning, I'm very passionate about visualization, and this is something that I know that Kate is also very passionate about, and I think it's really important because it helps people to feel that they are part of this challenge, and that they can understand why they need to take action.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And lastly, Antonia, the call to action. That is the purpose of your organisation, and I would like to give you the final word on our panel this evening.
There's a lot of pressure in having the floor at the end. Okay, so I think that what Silvina's saying is right. You know, we have heaps and heaps of data about climate change, and we understand the problem, and we know we have lots of the solutions. And so when I talk to my team and they have data and information for me, and I say to them, how do we communicate that, and what are the tools and the skills that we have to make the story clear, and to ask ourselves the question, which is, who is this information useful to, and how do we feed it into decision making so that it can really make a difference? Yeah, that would be my takeaway, I think.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for being here this evening on the panel. It's been an absolute delight to connect with you all, and I'm very, very pleased to see that areas around climate change and data have such strong leaders within New Zealand, and there are so many other women around New Zealand. And if you want to get involved in the space, I'm sure that you're all open to connections on LinkedIn. And yeah, that would be wonderful. So with that, I'll hand over to Nokuthaba in terms of finalising our evening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Silvina, Antonia, Kennie, and Kate again for that interesting panel discussion. So we will now wrap things up. But before we do that, I would just like to know if anyone has any questions. So if you have a question, you can raise your hand, and then we can unmute you for you to ask your question. Okay, someone has raised their hand. Who's that? I'm trying to see. Okay. Right. Okay, Kate Augustine, you've raised your hand. We can't hear.
Oh, her microphone's not working.
Okay. Okay, so Kate has a question for Silvina about engagement around Shiny apps. You want to type your question? So Kate says, how do you measure how many people are using your apps and what tools do you use?
Oh, that's an interesting question. So we have the Shiny app tools embedded in the EECA website. So it's actually our communications team who maintain the website. They are the ones who look at all these metrics. So how many people are engaging with the tools. I don't have the numbers on top of my head, but yes, it is interesting to know how many people are engaging with the tools. What else can I say about Shiny is that if you have understanding of programming in a language such as R or in any other programming language, it's quite easy to pick up R. R is a programming language that is very, very friendly, and the Shiny package is great because it allows you to basically build a data tool without needing to learn languages such as HTML or JavaScript to build a website. So with the skills of a data analyst, you can actually build a visualization tool using R, which I think is really awesome.
I'm not sure if we have any more questions. Oh, she's dropped off. Okay. I'm not even sure how to see if there's more questions. So if anyone has any, they could pop them into the Q&A. Okay. I think we she's back. She's back. Sorry about this, everyone. So I mean, obviously you can see that there's quite a lot in there, and actually one of the things is, as Silvina was saying, yeah, use your website stats, you know, really collaborate with your communications team. If you're a data scientist within your organization with a great idea, you know, build a partnership up with your communications team to help share your work as well. I'm just not sure if Nokuthaba is on. She's back.
I'm back, yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah, okay, sorry about that. So if anyone else has any questions, were there any questions that people raised?
No, I can't see any more. So
okay.
I think we'll go on a wrap up and talk
okay.
about next week, because we have an exciting agenda next week as well.
Yes, so we are back again next week, next Thursday, same time, and we have an exciting agenda next week where we'll have a number of speakers. We'll have Ocean Messier, who works at Victoria, and she'll be talking about Mātauranga Māori and data, which will be interesting. She works with Mātauranga Māori and trying to use data to try and understand that. And then we'll have a talk from Mariana Pecker from Martin Jenkins, who'll be talking about breaking into data science in the post-pandemic world. And then we'll be giving out scholarships next week. So thanks to the generous support of our scholarships, we have some funds to give out to some of our students, and we'll be announcing those winners next week as well. And then we'll have Hannah from Labs Data, who'll be talking about towards a more informed future for New Zealand's carbon emissions. And then we have a talk on Pacifica from Jacinta, who works for Moana Researcher, who'll be talking about Pacifica views on data. And finally, we'll have a panel that I'll facilitate, and they'll be looking at pathways in data science. And this is really exploring the different ways in which people can get into data science, but also thinking about the future of the field and how we might shape that to encourage more diversity, gender diversity, including more women, but also diversity in terms of having perhaps more Indigenous voices or voices from different areas. So I'm really looking forward to that, and I hope you are too. It'll be quite an exciting evening. So we're done for tonight. And Kate, did you want to say anything to wrap up?
Thank you everyone for coming along this evening. It's certainly been a really great theme of engagement across the channels that we've had with the online chat. And I do hope to see many of you back next week, and really delighted that next week we'll also be able to help support three women at Victoria University to continue their studies in the field of data science. So looking forward to seeing you all next week. Thank you.